Thank you. I am Joe Twyman, Head of Political and Social Research at YouGov. I have spoken at many such events so far during this campaign. I will be speaking at many more, but it's only in the esteemed surroundings of Stationers' Hall that I've managed to spill food down my shirt. So thank you to Winmark for such excellent canapes. I would also like to thank Winmark for commissioning some new research in this area. Winmark surveyed 111 of their members, and at the same time YouGov surveyed 2,000 British adults. And the comparison between these two sets of figures when it comes to data on the EU referendum, I think, is very interesting. Among Winmark members, overwhelmingly, remaining in the European Union is preferred. Some 75% of those surveyed opted for that option. Compare that to the national picture, and it's a lot tighter. In fact, it would be difficult to see it much tighter than we are at the moment, 51-49 in favour of Remain in our latest poll. So there, the picture between the two groups is very different. But among the other variables that we have looked at, among the other questions that we have asked, the story that emerges is actually relatively similar. People believe that leaving the EU would have a risk associated with it. They think it would be risky. Now, Winmark members are far more likely to think it would be risky than the general public, but the story is true for both groups. Similarly, the British public thinks that it would have a negative impact on business and a negative impact on our economy. By no means overwhelmingly so, but a plurality believe that in both cases. With Winmark members, it is overwhelmingly the feeling. And so one might ask, what does all this tell us? What good is all this data, both from YouGov and from the many other agencies that are conducting research into this area? Well, in terms of where we're going to be on the 23rd of June, I have this to say. And I've said this a fair few times in the last 12 months. Polls are only ever a snapshot of public opinion at the current time. They are not intended to be, nor should they be used as a prediction for where we're going to go. And so what they tell us at the moment is a company and a country divided. Where will things go from now until referendum day? No one can be sure. It depends on a lot of factors, not least the success or otherwise of the two respective campaigns. Why are those so important? Because a lot of attention has been paid to the dimension of leaving and staying, that all-important question. But there's a second dimension that is as important, if not more important, whether people will choose to vote or not. The Leave campaign can look to the nearly 4 million people that voted UKIP at the last election, people who will almost to a man and woman, usually a man, walk across broken glass in bare feet to vote in this referendum to leave the European Union. The Stay campaign has no such constituency. Instead, the Stay campaign is relying on people for whom Europe is not an important issue. It is relying on, generally speaking, younger people who we know are less likely to vote and are less engaged in politics. And it is relying on, for example, supporters of the Labour Party, who will look at the coverage of this campaign and find that not a single Labour figure has been mentioned in the top 10 list of people involved with this campaign on the TV. And so, where will things go from here? Well, generally speaking, if you follow historical precedent, you see a move towards the exciting new thing, in this case Leave, and then a reaction and a move back to the status quo, in this case Remain. We saw that pattern, that trend in Scotland. We saw that trend in the 1990s in Quebec. A guy called Alan Rennick, an academic at UCL, has gone back over the last 34 referendum of this type across the world and found that in 23 of those, the status quo prevailed. And so we would expect people to remain upset with immigration, dissatisfied with the political process, disapproving of politicians and political parties. And yet, when it came down to it, on the 23rd of June, moved back to the status quo because we remain a conservative, with a small c, country, at least in that respect. But a lot can change in 2 weeks, and it depends on the campaigns, and also it depends on historical precedents holding. You know, the kind of historical precedents that would state that Jeremy Corbyn would never become leader of the Labour Party, that Donald Trump would never become presumptive nominee for the Republicans, that the Lib Dems would not be wiped out at the general election, that the SNP would not dominate Scotland. Ladies and gentlemen, I could go on. But instead I will say, if you really want to know what's going to happen, I would advise following me on Twitter, but also watching Sky on election night, but also keep looking at the polls, keep watching the campaign, and look at the trends that we've seen before and we may see again. But nothing at this stage is certain. Thank you.